We are spinning and we are live in YouTube with a link that I will send you. And we will put in Discord. So those of you that want to watch, I probably shouldn't just notify everyone, should I? I should be nice. We are live on YouTube. Scott playing with. Do we always play with stuff, or do we test stuff, or do we evaluate stuff? Do we
Checking out a new thing.
checking out a new thing? Windows Admin Center. There we go. And for anybody, once I get around to, I need to edit a bunch of these, Scott, and get some of this stuff out on our actual YouTube channel. Because even if I announce membership, everybody right now watching this should already be a member, so it's like preaching to the choir.
Yeah. Well, good job.
Yeah.
Again, I'll put my editor on it.
All right. Perfect. If anybody is watching this and anybody's in our Discord channel and actually has a good YouTube editor, I would be interested, because my time is not my own. It is all dictated by other people. So
You and me both. But
right, it's been on my
let's
list.
get into our dictated time.
Yes, they are. YouTube editors are not necessarily cheap, even on Fiverr. So should we start with your screen or my screen as we dive into Windows Admin Center? Due to it's been out in some flavor for a while, but here I'm going to jump to my screen because I have the controls. So Windows Admin Center for Azure Virtual Machines was recently announced at Ignite. So Windows Admin Center, it's now generally available to let you manage your Windows Server operating system of your Azure virtual machines natively right in this Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal. So previously, this was out, I have it somewhere, like June, we got it for Arc-enabled infrastructure. It was out there for Azure Stack HCI, but now coming night, we have it for Azure virtual machines as well.
Yeah, it's a little weird. You potentially have to disambiguate a little bit here. I think, like Microsoft marketing at work. So Windows Admin Center is an administrative lens for Windows servers. Like that's all it is. But really, what we're going to talk about today is the capability to manage Windows servers and components of Windows servers, things like maybe installed software on a server, what roles are deployed on it, things like that. Manage all of those directly from the Azure portal, basically on a virtual machine by virtual machine basis. Windows Admin Center itself, as far as like the Windows Admin Center, like the thing that maybe I would stand up a Windows server and then I would deploy or install Windows Admin Center, and then I would associate N kind of servers in my environment, my local environment, over to that thing. That's been around for a while. So this isn't Windows Admin Center in Windows. This is Windows Admin Center from the Azure portal, kind of per virtual machine, just to kind of give you some context there, because I think it's super confusing with the naming, and we'll be floating around a bunch. But really what we're talking about is managing Windows virtual machines in a more holistic way from the Azure portal without necessarily needing to always RDP into or SSH into a Windows VM to manage it in some way, shape, or form.
Right. So when we had, I keep going to the wrong one, this preview for Azure Arc, this was the same thing, right? This is that same Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal. It just came to Arc enabled and Azure Stack HCI systems first, or is this the
Yes. So
installable
you'll
one?
see the way this kind of manifests is it's on kind of a per resource basis, or at least that's kind of how I've been playing with it and using it. Like,
Okay.
to be honest, I didn't go in and look and see like, hey, is there a bigger Windows Admin Center thing that I can just use as a resource? I've been doing it on a VM by VM thing, so we can go explore it a little bit. But if you think about it on a resource by resource basis, so when I deploy something like a Stack HCI system, or I have an Arc enabled server available in Azure, that presents as a single resource in the portal. And then you get all your kind of management experience there. You typically see like your common settings. You go down that left hand side in the portal. You've got diagnostics, troubleshooting, support, all those kinds of things. That similar experience is available to you over on the Azure side of the house.
Got it. Sounds good. And that was, I mean, that was kind of my assumption because I know I'm jumping back and forth between my tabs a lot. But like this documentation here, it talks about using this Windows Admin Center in Azure, and it has onboarding for virtual machines, for Arc enabled servers, and for Azure Stack HCI. So
Correct.
these
Yep.
appeared to be the ones from back in June. This is the one that GA'd here in October. Oh, and it looks like
Correct.
these
Yeah.
are still in preview. So these all hit preview earlier. This for Azure VMs is the only one that's GA'd.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's kind of the long and the short of it.
Got it. And it looks like so this was the other cool thing I was looking at. I was looking through this documentation, and it appears that Admin Center is completely free.
It is. Yeah. So there's no cost for it. It's built in. The cost is still your compute. Like this is a virtual machine that you're going to stand up. It's going to be
Yep.
running. The virtual machine needs to be active to run it. There's actually an extension that's deployed down to the Windows Server client, and just like any other extension, what would go out and manage it. So we can actually take a look at that on a couple of VMs and see what that experience looks like. It requires a couple of ports to be open, requires some outbound and inbound access rules around it in your network security groups. But yeah, it's I think it adheres to the principle where management operations should be free, but the resources that you've deployed are going to be things that you pay for.
Right.
You see a similar thing with like services like Azure Kubernetes Service. You don't pay for the management nodes. Like it's certainly compute that's running in your environment, but you're not paying for management. You're paying for the underlying compute of your actual cluster nodes, and then the pods that you're standing up on them that are consuming compute, things like that.
Yeah, and even if you would, we're going to look at Azure VMs, but even if you go to Azure Arc, Azure Arc, same thing, control plane functionality for Azure resources, Azure Arc resources, that's all free. You only get into paying for VMs if you're doing this in on-premises VMs. If you start looking at like guest policy configurations, Azure
Mhm.
automation, change tracking, onboarding them there, but you can even use this then to manage on-premises machines in the same way we're going to go through managing Azure VMs um, for free as long as you onboard them into Azure Arc
Correct. Yes.
and you're doing preview.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Previous, not production. All that jazz.
Yes. Insert our standard dialogue. We need to have like a recording for when we talk about stuff in preview. Um, Any other documentation you want to look at? You want to jump over and start playing with it on your screen? Because
Yeah.
you're the one
We
playing
can
with
just
it.
kind of jump over and get into it. I think it's pretty straightforward. But we can always hop back to the documentation if we need to. So just to ground you a little bit, I stood some of this up ahead of time just to kind of have some things pre-configured, and we'll kind of go through the onboarding experience for a VM. So what's covered by this today is Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2019, and Windows Server 2022. So just keep that in the back of your head. It's not for like client OS or things like that I saw from the documentation. So just to see it working across all three, I stood up three VMs, one of each flavor: Windows Server 2016, a 2019 and a Windows Server 2022, all data center editions. So we're not messing with like core without a GUI, anything like that.
You
Pretty straightforward.
read my mind. I haven't dug through the documentation as if you could do core, onboard it into here, and manage some of that stuff in a GUI on a core. But we can dive into
Uh,
that later.
yeah, it's going to depend on the components that you kind of have deployed down to it. So I'm going to go to one of these VMs. Real quick, I did have to do like we're going to deploy the agent right now and kind of take a look at what that looks like. But one thing I ran into in the documentation, it says that you need to have owner permissions, or there's a role assignment out there. Let's go and take a look at our roles. So I'm an owner in this subscription, so I should have that. Or there's this other role that's out there that's called Windows Admin Center Administrator Login. So
Okay.
basically, it lets you just manage the OS of this resource via Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal and kind of do like a local admin quasi login thing for you, right? Be able to kind of tunnel in quickly and get things done. So the documentation said you have to be an owner or this. It wasn't like you have to be both of these things. I couldn't get any of my other VMs that I onboarded to work without onboarding myself, even as an owner, into this role. So I don't know if that's just something that's off in the documentation, or maybe it's something that used to work in the service one way and now it's working another way and it's in flux. I don't know, but just to call that out. So I already went in this case and I applied that role assignment to a couple of users in my environment so that I'd have the ability to kind of go through and do the actual deployment. So to do that, we're going to go down to Windows Admin Center. And now what we have to do is we've got to kind of deploy the management experience. So like I said, there's an extension that gets deployed. If I go look at the extensions for my virtual machines right now, there's no extensions, it's not a VM application, like there's nothing there. So we
Okay.
go back over to Windows Admin Center. It's got an inbound port. You can change the port if you want to. What it's doing is it's setting an NSG. I'm going to do all this just so it's public and it's open to the internet on an NSG, just for kind of ease of demoware purposes here.
Right.
You don't have to do this. This can be locked down. It can be private on VNet. You don't have to use public IPs. You can do everything via private IP. Like it works. You've just got to kind of do some additional manual setup with your NSGs and things like that to get it all going. You also want to
Got
make
it.
sure that outbound internet access from your virtual machines is open. If outbound access isn't open, there's a little setting in here where you can say, just go ahead and open the outbound port for me so that Windows Admin Center can go ahead and be installed. And really what we're saying is bring this extension down and deploy this agent locally on my Windows server so that I can interact with it through this thing.
Got it. So
So you just
when
check. Yep.
oh, keep going, and then I have a question.
No, I was going to say, so we just check a couple check boxes and then we click install. You'll see your toast notifications come up in the portal for enabling the ports for the inbound outbound traffic, and then you'll also see a notification come up about actually installing the extension down, and this
Okay.
takes 3 to 5 minutes.
Got it. So while it's doing that, you're opening an inbound port on
Yes.
your VM. You said you're leaving it open to the internet. Really, what it's just creating is a rule in the NSG. If you would have, let's say, multiple NICs on the server, one that's maybe public, let's say this is a web server that actually does host um, a website, and you have a couple NICs on it, and you want to enable this on a specific NIC or secure it, is there any way to do it when you onboard it? Or is it you just have to understand that that's going in, applying a rule to your NSG, and you may need to go in after the fact and tweak your NSG accordingly to lock it down a little bit more?
So it's a checkbox. It's optional that you go ahead and kind of check that checkbox and move it
Oh,
off.
so you don't
So
have
you're
to
saying,
open that.
oh, you well, I'm saying, hey, Windows Admin Center, from the Azure portal, make my life easy, open this port for me, I can
Okay.
absolutely go do that setup on my own. So if you have different requirements there, your environment's more locked down, you can go and configure that. So you can go and say, okay, on this NIC, on this NSG that's associated with this IP over here, go and do these things to it. Like you don't have to use this experience. What you do have to use this experience for, from what I've seen, is installing the extension itself. But that's about it. Like you don't have to do any of the NSG
You don't
management
have to do
here.
the
If you want to do
ports.
all that manually, you just go ahead and you apply that as needed. So like if I go look at the NSGs, I can already see that outbound port rule's been applied. It opened up 443 outbound explicitly for me
Yep.
for Windows Admin Center as a destination. Eventually, like once the portal refreshes here, um, that other inbound NIC rule would show up as well. I think that was port 65, whatever it was, 616, or however it comes across. So the other thing that we're seeing now is like if I go look at my extensions, there's this admin extension that's being installed, admin center extension. And once that's installed and deployed, we'll be pretty much all good to go. So I've already done this on some other VMs that are out there. So let's go take a look at this one. So if I hop over here, so I've already deployed the extension. I'm already in that role. Gave myself IAM permissions. So I can connect over the public or private address. So public address not required. Like I could do
Got
it
it.
over the private as well. I'll just use the public one because it's already here. Make my life easy. I know that's how my NSGs are all configured up. You see it flashes by really quick, but it says like, hey, I'm initializing a route. I'm getting this all going. Like if I had to guess, this is just another one of those hybrid relay kinds of things, right? It kind of pings in and the service pings out outbound over 443, does that zero firewall punch thing and says, okay, I'm going to talk out and be managed now and be ready to go. And I think this is where it starts to get kind of cool. So I can come in and I can do things like, I mean, this looks just like kind of server manager or Windows Admin Center would on a virtual machine, or anything that you stand up, like just a machine that your environment. I can see I've got users logged in. I can see, disk space. I can go ahead and enable disk metrics. It's going to tell me like, hey, this is potentially an expensive operation. Do you want to do this? So I can see all that information like really quick at a glance, just like you'd be able to in Task Manager, kind of any other server manager experience. Certificates, I can actually import new certificates into a store from here. So, like, if I wanted to go and import a new like PFX file or like a P7B or a .cert file, I can do all that directly from the portal. I don't need to go in and kind of mess with anything. Oops, I disconnected. Don't click the big X button because it'll take you out of there. It's a little bit weird because it's a dedicated blade here that just takes up the whole screen. So a little strange. Device manager. You want to come in and see devices. Maybe you need to do a quick update to a driver, things like that. All set, ready for you to go. Uh, Windows event logs, pretty straightforward. Like I want to come in here and look at system events. I can export the log from here. I can go ahead and clear the log from here. It's kind of nice not to have to RDP to a VM and figure any of this stuff out. So for all these common management operations where maybe you found yourself in the past saying like, okay, I have to stand up a VM and then I need to make these kind of quick changes to it that potentially necessitate me logging onto the VM or firing up a remote PowerShell session or invoking a command over here, like if it's just a quick one-off kind of thing, you might be able to do it like pretty quickly through this tooling. Like if you're in the GUI and this is where you live, like this probably isn't a bad way to live. Like I logged onto this server earlier, I installed Edge on it, so I can do things like manage those applications. I can see the versions of those applications that are on here. This is a cool one. I was playing around with this one earlier. Windows Updates is available to you. So if you ever had that like one-off update that you need to install, again, like, do you want to go all the way to the server and do it? Like, no, I just want to come here and click a button and say, go ahead and install that update, fire it off for me, and have fun.
Right. Well,
Service health. So it's all pretty straightforward kind of stuff, right? Like it's the things that I would do that I would manage on a Windows server itself, but I never had to actually log into the server to do any of it, to interact with it, or to just kind of see at a glance what's going on with it.
right. Well, that's what I was just looking at. I was looking down your navigation here on the left side, and I'm like, okay, reasons I RDP into the server. Run a PowerShell script. It's on there. Set up some scheduled task. It's in there. Add a roller feature. It's in there. Start or stop services. See if a server has crashed. If it isn't running, let's say my Azure AD sync service, that's on there. Looking at the event log, installing certificates. Like that's all the those are all the reasons I ever log into a server. And I'm hard pressed to think of a reason I log into a server that's not on here. Um,
Yeah.
maybe
I,
if I'm trying to like compile a whole bunch of logs and run some scripts to pull a bunch of logs together and open them and like do some troubleshooting on the server, maybe it's quicker to RDP into it. But even then, if you can get PowerShell and you can get to files and file sharing, like can you download files and upload files as well through files and file sharing?
I don't know. I haven't actually gone into that one. Yes, yes, you can. So I can go into my C drive here. I can create a new directory. Oh, there we go. I created a temp folder. I can go into that temp folder and I can create a new file. Go ahead and submit that. What else can we do
You
here? I
download,
can
upload. It
download.
doesn't look
I,
like you can upload though.
I wonder if I can just drag and drop something. Give me a second here. Let me see. Do, do, do. Oh,
Just
I
go
got
create
this. Oh,
foo2.txt,
nope, that didn't do it. I was hoping I could just like drag and drop, and nope,
a file
can't
in.
can't do that. So it doesn't look like I can
Oh, there's
upload, but I can
upload. It's
download.
at the top there. I don't know
Oh, there you go.
why. Wow.
I missed it. It's all darn it. I did it again.
Well,
It's all kind of grayed out. Hold on, we're
yes.
gonna route back into that server. Let's get all that going again. We'll go back to our files there. So, I mean, this is a pretty responsive experience too, for like just saying like, hey, I'm routing into this server across the internet via its public IP. It's just as responsive over the private side. I can do new file shares here. Like I can configure permissions on these file shares. Like honestly, like this is great, right? Just as long as you don't click the big red X in the corner, like
Right.
you're all good. So let me show you some cool things that you can do here that I thought were kind of impressive. PowerShell. So I've got a local user on this machine.
Okay. So
Uh,
it's interesting that it doesn't have, it can connect and do everything else without credentials. But if you want to go run PowerShell, you need credentials. Is it because it's like opening a remote PowerShell session or something that
it
takes some
is. So
extra off?
so it's using WinRM, yeah,
Okay.
to push things through. But once I'm in here, like this is just PowerShell, right? Like I get tab completion. Like I didn't have to go into Cloud Shell and do something funky first. I didn't have to go and use like the run command stuff on a VM. Like this
Right.
is way more seamless to me to be able to go and do this. So if I wanted to do something, like if I wanted to download a file, I guess, what I could do is do just like a wget here or like a curl if I had that installed. And I could just download that over to like that temp directory that I just created in files and file sharing. And then I could go and download it out of that temp directory right from there. I'd have to hop between the experience a little bit, but I think that's all doable and easy enough to do. Like this is a pretty responsive experience. Like it's not bad at all.
No, and like I think through the risks of enabling RDP on Azure servers, unless you're going to do, I mean, maybe if you do it private, when I enable RDP on my servers, I lock it down to my IP address and an NSG. I mean, other options when it comes to securing these servers are you use Bastion, you use the just-in-time access, but those both require additional licensing. This for no additional licensing, I can completely disable RDP to the server and do all of this.
Yes, you could. Boy, oh boy, do I have a treat for you because you mentioned Bastion. So real quick, run through the rest of these. Perfmon's perfmon. You can go ahead and spin up whatever you want. You can do packet captures from here,
Oh
which
wow.
is kind of cool. Like just do a constrained packet capture. Like what are your filters for PCAP? Like you put those in, you run it. It just runs and
Where does it
does what it needs to do.
where does it put it? Does it put it in a file like right here then that you can
Yeah.
download and open?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll see here it just ends up with the little save dialog, so you can go ahead and grab that down. You can see running processes. You can end a process. Like if you had like, back to that whole like I need to RDP to the server, and sometimes that stuff is just broken, and you need to give it a swift kick in the rear end. Like
Yep.
you can actually come in here and roll that stuff over. You can import and export registry keys. So if you just needed to add a new registry key, you need to view a value, something like that, real quick. All super easy. You can mess with scheduled tasks. Easy enough. Roles and features. You want to install a new role? You can totally go through the thing where I'm going to do invoke a command or try and do like DSC, something like that to install it. But honestly, like again, if you're a GUI person, like you just want to come in and you're like, I need a DHCP server on here, just come in and click a checkbox and click install, walk away, come back in a couple of minutes, and it's done. Right? Like go ahead and configure it, do what you need to do. Security is all your Defender stuff, virus, threat protection.
Okay.
What have you done on there?
So I saw,
Uh,
can you go back to the summary of security? Yeah, we still have it.
yes. Yep.
So I saw real time protection is on. Like, is Defender Lite automatically on? Are these enrolled in Defender by default? Is that
Yes.
real time
Yeah. It's
protection?
just a built-in Defender service. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So I deployed marketplace images, which come with all that stuff turned on.
got it. Okay,
Yep. So we had that. Storage, pretty straightforward. So if you wanted to, I don't know, stripe some disks together, right? Create a new logical volume, like a storage group, and put all that together. You can do that. You can attach VHDs from here. Like if you had like a VHD locally, darn it, I clicked the big red X again. Um, Still haven't figured that one out.
okay.
So like,
While it's going, I have another. I don't think it would work. As you add roles and features, let's say you throw in IIS, or because we were talking about it the other day related to Azure Arc machines, you throw on like Hyper-V to do embedded VMs. Does that any of that stuff end up surfacing in the tools as it
no,
detects additional features, or is this kind of a locked list?
no, this is a locked list.
Okay.
But I mean, like again, nice just to be able to kind of like manage it from there, right? Like go ahead and click the
Right.
button and install it for me. Walk away. I think this is built for a class of admins who maybe never got comfortable with the command line. Like you just want to do something quick. Like a GUI is path of least resistance, and I can get behind that, right? Like if you can make my life easier and it's the way I manage things, then okay, no harm, no foul.
Yep.
Um, but back to that remote desktop thing. So remote desktop on a virtual machine in Azure is kind of a pain sometimes, right? So if I come in and I say, all right, I want to RDP to this VM, great, there's the IP address. I want to download the RDP file. Well, I don't want to like download the RDP file. I just want to RDP to the thing, or I just want to
Right.
SSH into it. Oh, well, I can do that, but I got to use Bastion, and Bastion is a different service. Bastion, I believe to this day, still does not have a start stop button. So once you deploy a Bastion service, you're paying for it hourly, whether you're using it or not. Like it's just an always on construct and it's kind of kicking around. And, there's ways to like script that and automate it and say, like, okay, I'm going to tear down my Bastion service when I'm not using it. I'm going to stand up a new one. You've got to have a subnet carved out for it, like space for it in your subnets. Like it, it's
Right.
pretty painful to get that done. So sure, I can come in here and I can RDP. And I could just go to my RDP client, and as long as my NSGs and everything are configured, like I'm all set and ready to go. I think there's still friction there. So check this out. So I'm going to go ahead and hit connect here. And we're going to come down to remote desktop. And you just saw, like, I don't have a Bastion service deployed.
Yep.
Like, I'm still in the portal, haven't left it, anything like that. It's going to pre populate my username, but I don't have this user on there. So I'm going to go back and connect as that admin user. Do.
And then that's
If
like
you uncheck connect automatically with the certificate, like the connect button grays out. So you just check that off. You say, yep, I'm going to confirm it. All
got
right, you
it.
ready for this? I click connect. And as long as I type the password right, no Bastion, no anything, I just RDP'd into that
You just
virtual machine.
RDP. Is RDP enabled on the server? Like, do you need to have the RDP?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
But again, this was a marketplace image, right? Like
Right.
this was a GUI, like a Windows Server data center. So it was there and available by default. I'm making the broad assumption. I didn't test it out, but if I deployed core and then I stood up the GUI on top of that, like I think you could totally get there.
Yeah.
But I just like want to like how seamless was that? Like no
Right.
Bastion, no RDP file. I didn't need an RDP client. So I can do all this from the browser as long as I'm in a supported browser. Like that is
That's
super powerful, super nifty to me.
for sure. Did you need, and I guess the other thing with the RDP service, did you need to have port 3389 open at all, or does this connect similar to Bastion where it's not using the open incoming RDP port?
I did have to have the port open, but again, let me go back out of here. When I connect, I can choose how I'm actually
The
connecting
private
and
IP address.
routing into that component.
So
Yep.
you could
So
block RDP on that public IP address, only allow it over that private IP.
yep. And this is an interesting behavior thing because I'm in the portal, which is technically public, and I'm not on the VNet right now. So for me to be able to connect from Windows Admin Center over the VNet, like I would have to be on the VNet to get that done. So I would need to be on like an express route or a site-to-site VPN or things like that. So that's what I'm saying. For like demoware, we'll use the public IP, but all this stuff is possible over the private IP. You don't have to open up the public IP to the internet to make it work, but you do need to make sure that the machine you're managing it from, even though I'm coming from the portal side of the world,
Yep.
has access to that thing. Like it has to be able to route to it somehow and get to it. So it's adhering to all your security kind of stuff. It wasn't like I could connect to the private IP from just any old public, machine that was out there, or anything like that.
So I'm trying to think through this. So the admin center is not on the VNet, which is why the private IP address was getting blocked? Or what needs to be
I'm
on?
not I'm not on the VNet. It's still
Oh,
because
got
it's
it.
relying on connectivity from my browser, right? This is
Got it.
effectively like
So
an all in the
this is
browser thing.
got it. Got it. Got it. So this isn't connectivity from Azure to the VM. It's connectivity from your browser to the VM.
Yeah, so yes, so then it can do that tunnel and talk into the agent.
Got
Yep.
it. Okay.
So yeah, I can do remote desktop PowerShell from here. So if we go back over to that other VM that we deployed earlier, so if we go look at our toast notifications, we can see it opened the ports and deployed our extension. We go to extensions. I can see that provisioning succeeded. So now we should be able to come into Admin Center here. We should be able to hit click connect. And same thing, like we haven't done anything special, right? All I did was basically go open that port for me and deploy the extension.
Yep.
And then I get that same exact experience over here. It's a little slow to load up the first time. I think it's caching some stuff, but like you've seen like subsequent times when I was going into that other one, it was totally fine, totally quick.
Sweet. And you can even have -1 logged in users.
I can, because there is nobody has logged into this thing yet.
Well,
So
wouldn't
that's
that
kind of
be
like there's
0? Isn't 0 nobody?
Maybe. So I was interested in, um, so this is like Windows Admin Center. I'm at the VM level. In this case, I've had to come in like VM by
Right.
VM kind of thing. I was kind of hoping that Windows Admin Center would actually be like,
Like a
I
service
didn't,
where you could go see all of your
yep,
machines.
I didn't look earlier, but it doesn't look like it is. That's kinda disappointing. Like, I'd like to have just one big blade where I could go in and see those 3 VMs on their own, and do whatever I needed to from there.
Yeah, so if you don't, I want to think through that port thing again. Because we did the extension, we did it all automatically. Is it all going over? It's not all going over the same port because you're connecting from your browser to the machine. So you're just specifying which port your browser is connecting to on the machine. Um, when you go out, like here, and you're connecting over public IP, when you set up that whole
Yep,
configuration, you set it up on 6516. Your other server could potentially be 65, 17,
yep,
18, etc.
totally. Yeah, you customize that at the time that you kinda click the button and deploy the extension. I haven't seen a way to disconnect this. Like, say you ever wanted to change that port in the future. I don't know, like,
What
I
if you
haven't
remove the
tried it.
extension? Wouldn't that, like,
Uh,
if you uninstalled the extension?
yeah, we can try it. Like, let's go over to this other, fine server here. So let's just take our
I think
admin center.
I keep forgetting, like, with the ports and everything, that it's not specifying a port that an Azure service is going to use to connect to the VM, or a port that the VM is using to communicate with Azure, because it's all really just happening from your browser directly to the
Yes.
VM.
Yep. Yeah, well, my client more specifically, right? Like, just think about
Yeah,
it as like, yeah, hey, my machine sitting here needs to be able
to
to do
connect
these
over
things.
that port to that VM.
Yep. So I think like from the brief time that I've spent with this, like I can see the value of it. Like I said, for a certain class of operations, certain types of admins, like I love the command line, but honestly, like some of this stuff is just so easy that like I could be inclined to just go in here really quickly and do things like that. Like I love the idea of being able to run like a PowerShell session just like straight through here without having to do a run command or something else. So like if we
Right.
go back to this VM, like if I close out of here, just for folks who haven't seen it before, uh,
I think of things while you're
if I
looking for
can,
that. I think of things using that, like viewing the event log is one that I have never, nor do I ever care to figure out how to go look at my event log using a command line.
yeah, yeah. So here's the run command. Like this experience of just like copying, pasting text, hoping I typed it the right way, all these
Right?
kinds of things.
No
Like I don't
tab
get tab
complete and any of
completion
that.
here. I actually have to wait for the PowerShell buffer to return and write information back to me as well. There's timeouts that can happen here, like all sorts of weird things. Like this experience, like if I came in here and I did a git process and we hit run, all right, so I got to wait for this thing to be sent to the VM, and then that's going to probably take like 30 seconds or so. It's going to talk to the agent. The agent's got to capture the output. This also isn't running as me. This is just running in the system context. Like I didn't choose a user. Like you were kind of put off that you had to log into that PowerShell prompt. I actually think that's a good thing because then I'm going in as
You,
somebody. Like I get
yeah,
accountability, I have auditability, traceability, kind of on that process, right? Like that's just an all up better observability story than something like run PowerShell script. Like I look at the run command, like if I want to invoke a command, like I'm going to go into the Cloud Shell and I'm going to invoke a command against a VM resource. I'm probably going to use that to like install some software, do some things. Like this is like not great, right? Like this is the output I got. It's all cut off. I didn't get any of the headers. I didn't get anything like that. versus I come back over here, I go to admin center, we connect real quick to this again. Do and I say, let's load up PowerShell. This will do its thing real quick. Do our user.
So I can't see, due to what we're using to stream, your address bar is cut off. If you have this enabled, do you have to go through Azure to get to this? Or potentially, as people would enable this, kind of like RDP. RDP, you put it on a public IP address, that's bad because people go and scan for port 3389, try to enter credentials and get into it. Is it possible if people started figuring out ports, let's say the port we used in this case is the default whenever you install Windows Admin Center and people tend to leave it.
Yep.
Could you essentially do like a port scan to try to find VMs that have Windows Admin Center open and log into them?
100%.
Okay,
So yes to the port scan to figure out what's going on. It's actually called out in the documentation, like, uh, hey, just like with a virtual machine, don't open this thing up to the internet for inbound RDP. Don't open it up to the internet for inbound management. Right?
got it.
This is like happy easy path demoware kind of thing. Like we're just nexting our way through things.
Yep,
Like this is not a good default configuration, not recommended for anybody. Like take the time to be intentional about the way you configure your NSGs. Take the time to be intentional to make sure that your clients have to be on the VNet to be able to interact with the resources in those VNets.
got it. Or worst case scenario, similar to how I do my RDP, make sure that that port is not open to all IP addresses, but is locked down to your corporate public IP. So someone has to physically be on your network in order to get
Yep.
to it.
Yep, same thing. So it looks like it's just that extension. We uninstalled that extension, gave it a chance to clear itself out. I came back and it's asking me like, "Hey, do you want to do this configuration again?"
Nice. I
Yeah,
like it. So it does appear that it always uses 6516 as the default inbound port,
yeah, but this is a text field.
right? So
I
you
can
just
change
type
this. If I
in
wanted to make
whatever
this 8080, I wanted to make it 443, like whatever you want it to
whatever
be.
port you want.
Yep, you can go ahead and do that. You've just got to, either pre-configure the NSG, or if you're going to do it this way, like, make sure that you don't type it in there wrong or anything like that. Check the check boxes that you need if you want the portal to do the work for you, like, go ahead and patch those resources and update their configuration, those kinds of things.
Got it. Very cool. This is nifty. I'm gonna have to go play around with this. I have a couple VMs. I might go turn it on and make sure it's
Yeah,
locked
this
down to
this
only
was
my
a,
IP.
a fun one. Like sometimes there's things like you just look at them and they're kind of daunting. You're like, oh my gosh, it's going to take forever to set up, or is there going to be any value there? Like it's going to be really hard. Like super easy. Like it is just next. Like I made it here. Like the only time that I saved was pre-deploying these virtual machines. Like you saw, we hopped right in onto that Windows Server 2022 one, deployed
Right.
the extension, and by the time we had run through the list on the other thing, we came back and it was done, and it just worked. Like there
Yep.
there wasn't anything to
And
worry about there.
adding that access control, adding that permission level, even if you're an owner, right?
That's a weird one. So that one got me for a little while because I kept coming into Windows Admin Center, and it'll pop up a little bar up at the top here, just below the refresh button, and it'll say, "Hey, you've deployed, but we're not ready to connect right now. You might need to go look at your identity and access management." So it does at least give you a link that links out to the documentation. It gives you a link to link out to the documentation where the roles are, and if you click it, it just takes you right into the IAM blade. It takes you right here, so that you can go ahead and start checking your access and get all that stuff going.
Got it.
Um, and when you add that, just because it takes a while for roles to propagate in Azure AD, hey, Azure AD folks, like fix this someday, but it can take a couple minutes for role propagation to go through. So don't do it. Don't click next, 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 add the role, and then come back and say, all right, 10 seconds later, it's not working. Like that's probably going to take like again like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, could be like 5 minutes. Go grab yourself a cup of coffee,
Got it.
come back, and once you've done that, like it just works
It should work.
as is, like we've been running through here.
Got it. Scott, you should know this. There's a lot of servers in Azure it has to propagate across in order to make sure that whatever server you hit that's checking for your access, it's there.
I just want it to propagate into my subscription, into my scope of my resource group right now. Darn it.
Immediately. But how many
Yep.
servers are running your scope and your resource group and all your stuff?
Who knows? Like,
All right. Well, very cool. I like it. I'm going to go play with it. But right now, I have a meeting.
yep. That's what we're gonna do is go play meeting bingo next. So yeah. Thanks for the time.
All right.
Anybody has any questions? They know where to find us. Reach out.
Yeah, for sure. Leave a comment. Let us know any other tech you want us to play with too. Office 365 Azure, if there's something else you want us to create one of these videos on, leave it in the chat. Let us know. And thanks, Scott. That was fun. We'll talk to you again, at least, or we'll do another one of these hopefully in another couple weeks here.
Yep. Thanks, Ben.